Good morning and welcome to the Pleasure for Health podcast, where I, Elsa Kepi, take on issues relating to sexuality, erotic intimacy, and relationships. And today we are going to dive into the hot topic of, what are we seeing in our external world, in politics, in society, culturally, and how is that related to our own relational contexts? So that's what we're diving into today. If you want to find out more about me and my work, you can go to pleasureforhealth.com. I also have a couple of new things coming out, so I will tell you about those in a little bit. But let's just dive right in and look at the problem that we have going on, especially in Canada, here where I am, and how does that relate to relationships? So, as a relationship coach, I'm going to see the world from my lens of relationships. And what I see showing up here, what I've seen over the past, quite a while, a number of years, if not decades, is the idea that we look to our government, our structures, societal structures and contexts to look after us, to take care of us in a way of, we don't want to have to take responsibility for our own lives. So somebody else can come in and take that responsibility on for us. We're happy about that. And so here's the thing. That is a good thing up to a certain point. But if we become complacent and if we stop growing and stop taking on responsibility and stop taking the opportunity to mature individually as a being, then all we're kind of becoming is kind of like children. And this has been brought up in many ways and stories and movies and things. H.G. Wells, I think it was, brought it up in The Time Machine back 100 years ago, that the childlike beings that survived on the surface of the earth were unable to stand up for themselves and or take any type of responsibility, and so they lived in what seemed like a very idyllic place, but they had no ability to deal with any problems. And so the other half of humanity had been subjugated and put underground and had become very resourceful but also very mean, and so survived by coming up and raiding the upper people, and that kind of thing. And that's been a theme in humans for a long time. But what we see really now is this idea that if we just let our government do everything for us, that will be somehow better, that we'll have a better life, we'll have more time for our hobbies or our loved ones, or we'll have more freedom to do our own thing. But what I want to kind of discuss today is the possibility that we're actually kind of going backwards when we kind of just give up our responsibility and our power. Are we just going backwards? Because growing up and like maturing, our ability to have relationships that require us to be present and to be mature in our outlook, we don't want to be in a parent-child type of relationship. We want to be in a relationship of equals. And this was brought to me when I actually did a retreat on our relationship with the divine, with God, with the universe, with the universal energy, the ground of being, whatever you want to call that thing that's larger than us. When we have a relationship with that, how do we have that relationship? And for me, I was shocked actually to find out that many of my ways of relating to God and the universe was kind of as a putting it very distantly far away from me. And even in some religions, it's like, God exists in the heavens and we are on earth. So it's kind of like distancing ourselves from that. And as a relationship coach, I'm starting to see that, intimacy with ourselves and the ability to really experience intimacy begins with this ability to get really up close and personal with our version of this God or universal energy or however we want to call that. And so, can we actually be intimate with that force? And if we can and take responsibility for showing up that to that relationship, then it's much more difficult to just give over our power and our decision making to the government as a pseudo father figure, that was just going to take care of us. And we start to see that we need to grow up and actually engage in a relationship with these bigger structures in the world that we've somewhat created, but now seem to be just kind of doing their own thing. So, as a relationship coach, I feel like there's this really interesting way of looking at what's going on, and do we continue to push things away because we don't want to look at it, we don't want to be intimately involved with what's going on, we don't want to realize that we have a part in it. Oh, somebody else will take care of that. Somebody else will look after, clear away, do whatever needs to be done. We'll just get on with our lives. But really, I have to ask myself, and I'm asking you all as well, what do you consider to be worthy of living? Like, do we want to just do hobbies and things that don't really matter and leave the big decision making powers and the responsibility of deciding the direction of our culture and our society to someone else? It's somewhat like being a kid. If you're 5 years old, your parents decide where you're going to go for the day, what school you're going to go to, what you're going to wear, maybe. Do we want to give up all that power to our governments? And, I'm not advocating that we have complete anarchy at all, but I'm asking that we consider a relational approach, that we actually want to show up to this relationship. Have we ridiculed people for going into politics or for becoming leaders? Or do we actually see the benefit in, teaching our young people to have empowered thoughts about what they want to see in the world and to show up and be able to be heard so that they feel like they can make a decision, for all of us to make a decision. So if you were in a relationship with your intimate partner and, if you were always just saying, oh, whatever you want, dear, yeah, I'm just going to do this and you do whatever you want. And, we see that in some relationships around us. We've had that modeled in some movies and probably in real life, some couples that are like that, where one person seems to be in the driver's seat and the other person just kind of goes along with. Some people are happy like that. And I'm not judging those people, but I think we have to definitely ask ourselves, is there something more to be done? Is there more to be gained, more to learn, more to living than just going along with and letting someone else make all the decisions? So for me personally, I feel like I want to have an actual relationship with my life. I want to have an actual relationship with myself, with my partner, with my culture, with my community, with my society. So what does that require of me? Well, it requires of me that I show up. It requires of me that I don't just stay quiet about what I think. It requires of me that I'm willing to listen to other people's views, obviously, because a relationship just becomes abusive if I come in and say, well, here's what I think, everybody has to do that. But in a relationship, for anyone that's had any experience in relationshiping, we know that you talk about things, you might live with it for a while, you might pick your battles a little bit, you might agree to disagree on certain things, and at the end of the day, if you love each other and you find a way through it, and you're like, what, we can just agree to disagree on that particular topic, or I'll give you your space to go do that and I'll do this, and we'll come together on these other issues. And I think that these relationship qualities and skills are something that could really benefit us now. And one of the saddest things I've seen over the last couple of years with all of us being locked down and not having so much social interaction is that we've almost kind of stopped practicing having real relationships with people. And me included, a lot of my relationships, my friendships are now online, which is very different than being in real life space with people. if I was to be building a fence with someone or planting a garden or, running a workshop with someone in the flesh live together, we would find a way to make things work out, even if we didn't agree on everything. But, online, it's very easy to just kind of cancel someone and say, well, we don't agree. So I'm just going to unfriend you or not talk to you. I don't need to deal with you. And this kind of pushing everything away and letting someone else deal with the issues, is a recipe for loneliness. It's a recipe for kind of becoming less intimate with our life, with the people in our life, with the structures and the communities and the society and the cultures that we want to be involved with. So it's been an interesting challenge for me as a relationship coach to come in and look at what's going on and say, how can I use the skills that I have, that I can bring to this, to help us to move forward. And I think what comes to me is that people can look at their own stuff. What is coming up for you in these relational dynamics when you feel overpowered, when you are feeling that you're in the right, when you're feeling like you're having all these feelings? What comes up for you there? Does it relate to any traumas or things from your past that are being triggered? These are the kinds of questions I ask myself. Many of us have felt, those of us that are kind of on this path are feeling that we've been abandoned, or that we've got kind of an orphan child archetype going on. And so we tend to, kind of do our own thing, and we don't want to rely on other people. And this can be to our detriment, if we let that orphan child program run our entire response to what's going on right now. We're just going to be like, well, nobody cares about me anyway, so I'm just going to do my own thing, which isn't really going to help us come together. So we have to look at that. So this is our work to do as an individual. And I feel like taking responsibility to really look at our relationships, look at our history of relationships, and see where it is that we have growth to do, and how could we work on that in the current time with people in our life now. How can we relate to, do we fight authority? Do we rebel against authority? Do you go in and, whip your mask off in front of it and, stick your middle finger up? Like, is that an adult thing to do? Is that kind of a teenager thing to do? And I'm not judging anyone. I mean, whatever's up for you, I'm only saying to question that for yourself and to say, oh yeah, you know what? I don't need to respond like a teenager in this case. I could respond like an adult. How would I do that? Well, I could, state my reason for wanting to follow this rule or not that rule, and, see how that landed with the other person. If it was something that was going to be a really big problem for the other person, is this worth my, standing up for myself? Is this the person I need to be having this discussion with? Is there someone else? Am I taking my anger out on someone that really isn't the person that has any power to change anything? So who do we need to speak to? How do we need to speak to them? These are things we need to look at within ourselves and actually, take some time to look at maturely at how we could respond. So to that end, my course that I created a few years ago called Radical Responsibility speaks exactly to this. And I created it at a time when I was trying to help people, recover from abusive relationships, and to look at why did they end up in these same types of relationships over and over again. And, we have to ask ourselves collectively, why have we all ended up in this place? Or many of us have ended up in this place. Maybe not everybody has the view that I do. And so, if there's a number of us that have ended up feeling oppressed or whatever, why is that? And how do we change those relationships with the external world? And so, as always, there is some work to do within ourselves, and there's some work to do with others. And so we always want to kind of take into account both of those. So shaming and blaming other people without turning an eye inward and looking at ourselves is, irresponsible. And just looking inwards and getting caught in our own stuff and then never taking action in the external world is also irresponsible. So I feel that we need to, really take an interest in our own growth and in the growth of all of us as a whole in the universe and as a human race. How are we going to move forward? And so this requires this type of responsible relationshiping. And so if you're interested in working on this type of stuff, this is my passion, and I'm very happy to offer people an introductory kind of email, see where we fit. If you'd like to work with me, there's different ways to do that. I would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your comments on this podcast, on this topic. What do you think we should be working on? What do you think are the relationship issues coming up? How can we do that work together and as individuals so that we can actually move forward? So that's my thought for the day. And thank you so much for joining me live or listening to this later on. And I hope that you have some things to think about as far as your own relationships, what shows up for you, and how you might want to move forward with working on those skill building things that we can do with the people that are in our lives right now and with ourselves. And let's see how that translates into more of a society, of culture, a Canadian, worldwide movement. It comes from each of us doing our work. So thank you for listening, and we will see you in the next show.